Peace and blessings. Welcome to another segment of Poetry and Prayers. We are looking at this collection of African American poetry for young readers. It's edited by Arnold Rampersad and Marcellus Blount, and it's illustrated by Karen Barbour. I am so sorry. I don't think I've mentioned that. So again, who's brilliant? Who's amazing? Who has the power to do all things through Christ who strengthens you? That's right. We all do. And specifically to my chocolate drop, Niaja, who is blessed from the crown of her head to the sole of her feet, believing that you have a life filled with purpose and you have so many people who love you and you have a brilliant mind and ability to write poetry and create amazing art. So for anyone else that's listening in, these videos are specifically directed to my daughter, from whom I'm estranged at the moment, and so I do the videos to give her an opportunity for us to have an opportunity to share. Because sometimes we're not always able to have phone conversations, so or video calls. So, but I know that she goes online and she loves to look up. They have these little like videos where they try out toys or they do storytelling, and she really enjoys the storytelling, and so I do these for her. So this is one of many, and what we're looking at specifically today is the Black finger. So one of the reasons why it's important, and even with it being Black History Month, why it's important for us to study Black history year round is because cultural edification and cultural awareness is one of the girding factors in making sure you understand who you are and that you have a confidence that's not based on what you have, but it's based on the legacy of amazing people who've made it possible for you to not only live, but to really thrive and go after all of the things that you want. So, in a lot of the poems, there's a message of hope, even though sometimes it sheds light on a dark history. You have to believe, and what you hold on to is that the hope that things are getting better, because that's what you're picking up and carrying on. And so, even now with this being Black History Month, we know that one of the reasons why we have the things that we have is because people fought to ensure that our voices were heard. So Carter G. Woodson fought for us not to just have Black history sometimes, but his goal was that we would look at Black history 365 days of the year, especially when it was at the inception. People didn't really talk about it, and it was like, as a matter of fact, they said that blacks weren't really full human beings, that were property. So it's a really, really big deal. And so this month's theme for Black History Month is commemorating the 15th Amendment, which gave African Americans the right to vote. As it's written, it said the African American man, but what we understand is that because of also, again, women who struggled and fought, women like Dorothy Irene Height and the National Council of Negro Women, NCNW, who fought for women to also be treated equally. Um, that was a critical part of it. All blacks were able to vote under the 15th Amendment. So that's the theme of Black History Month. So now we're looking at The Black Finger, and it was written by Angelina Weld Grimke. Okay? Grimke spent her early years in and around Boston. Later, she taught school in Washington, D.C. before moving to New York. There, she was admired as the author of several published poems and one successful play, Rachel, about a young woman's painful experience of racial discrimination. Her poem here is in free verse, unrhymed, and with lines of varying length, as had become common in the modern era of poetry. Although it never mentions race as a topic, it perhaps links the silhouette or outline of a beautiful dark cypress tree to the rising hopes and dreams of Black people. So, again, when we talk about figurative language, or we talk about using personification, and that's where we assign human attributes to either animals or objects that wouldn't otherwise have those attributes or act in that particular way. That's what it's referencing. And when he talks about form, do you remember when we wrote your acrostic poem, and each line it started with we did it with your name, and for each letter in your name we wrote a sentence. So that's a specific form or style or structure to poetry. This poetry is free verse. And you remember we wrote the other poem about the elephant and it rhymed, and some of the poem we read by Paul Laurence Dunbar had rhyme in it too. Not every poem has to rhyme. Not every poem has to follow a specific structure. Each author has the right to kind of change it up depending on how they're feeling and how they'd like to communicate with their audience. Okay, so that's important to note. All right, so now let's look at this particular piece, and it says. Again, the title of this piece is called The Black Finger. And it says, I have just seen a beautiful thing, slim and still against a gold sky, a straight black cypress, sensitive, exquisite, a black finger pointing upwards. Why, beautiful still finger, are you black? And why are you pointing upwards? I'm going to read it again. I have just seen a beautiful thing, slim and still, against a gold sky, a straight black cypress, sensitive, exquisite, a black finger, pointing upwards. Why, beautiful, still finger, are you black? And why are you pointing upwards? So, cypress is an evergreen tree known for its dark foliage. Do you remember on the song You Love Thinking Out Loud with Ed Sheeran? And he was like, something like love is evergreen or everfree. Oh no, that was on My Little Pony. Well, it's in that song too, but it was on My Little Pony, and they go into like the everfree or the evergreen forest. So usually these cypresses, even in the winter months, and even when it can get really cold, they stay green for a really long time, like Christmas trees. So if we had a live Christmas tree, we use an artificial one, but live Christmas trees are green even in the winter, and we know that what happens in the winter. Right. Leaves fall off or they turn brown or, things start dying because we don't have as much daylight. And sometimes trees don't get as much water because it depends on the weather. Well, I mean, snow is water too, but um, they don't get the same amount that we may get in the rainy season, like after winter going into spring. So we expect that we would see more leaves dying, but an evergreen can go through the hardest of temperatures and still be green. And so when you talk about what it means to be of African descent, it means that you've gone through the worst of it. You've gone through seasons where it's summer and everything is beautiful and you're swimming and it's wonderful. And then you've gone through seasons when it's winter and gone through seasons when it's fall, and you start seeing things change, but maybe not as quickly as you would like, or maybe not in the way that you would like. Then you get into the discomfort of winter. But then there's always the burgeoning Genesis, or the awakening, or the second chance, or the newness of spring. And so the evergreen will endure all of that and is present in each season. And so that's what makes it such a phenomenal reference and a phenomenal symbol in this particular piece. And she says, but she talks about the black finger, So as African descended people, there are a number of a number of places where we can point to say, hey, you mistreated me, or this person mistreated me, or this experience wasn't fair, right? But rather than doing that, it's pointing upward. It's saying that regardless of what I've gone through, regardless of what my challenge is, I will go up. I will press forward. And that's the thing. For some people, that can be compelling, or that can be confounding, meaning it's kind of confusing. Like, how are you still excited? Or how are you still believing for goodness? How are you still expecting for something amazing to happen? And it's because there's hope. You know, that's the story of the evergreen, that regardless of what the season is and regardless of how uncomfortable it becomes, I will continue to be hopeful. I will continue to hope for better things to happen. And so, where other people, again, and that's what our challenges should do. Our challenges should compel us to be resilient and to be persistent. Okay, and so if you're feeling uncomfortable and you feel, sometimes we talk, and we were talking the other night and you were kind of like, well, mommy, I'm upset about this particular thing. And that's okay. One of the things you have to remember is you take the things that anger you and allow it to compel you to say, you know what, but I'm going to work harder. Because, I think that's where you got to at the end of the conversation, even if it wasn't necessarily the way I would have hoped for you to do it. Eventually, you were like, well, I'm going to do such and such, such and such. And in that, you were evergreen. You know, you were standing tall and you were holding on to what you believed in, and you didn't allow there to be a challenge that, made you shrink or kind of shrivel up. You said, you know what, I'm going to stand firm and I'm going to believe because I can stick it out because you can and you're able to. So, with that said, let's do our prayers. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So before I completely close out the video, I just want you to take a look at what the illustration is. And I know on some of the other illustrations, I didn't give you an opportunity to really look at it. Would you see the person kind of sitting here with their knees folded? And sometimes you may want to just like cry and give up. But, there's a certain stature that hope brings to you. And so even if you look at the tree pressing upward, okay, nice, tall, and firm and strong. And then some of the other illustrations that I haven't shared with you. This is the one from the Great Migration. And so this styling kind of reminds me slightly of the way your faces look when you paint. When you paint or draw faces, they kind of look like this. This very rounded, and it's almost like a Picasso-inspired kind of form to the face. But we haven't actually done that yet, so sorry. I was doing it might have been, but I just want you to just kind of take a look at it. But that's it. So that's the end of that, and I think I already said the prayer. So that's the end of this particular segment. I'll be doing another one in another few minutes, in a few minutes. But anyway, I love you dearly. I not only love you, but I appreciate you, and I hope that you have a very, 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 very awesome day. And that goes for anyone that's listening. I love and appreciate you as well. All right, take care.